I have a little treadmill, and then I stand and I walk on it and I type, or I'm in a meeting. And my watch is like, "Are you still exercising?" This is On Nutrition, a podcast from Mayo Clinic where we dig into the latest nutrition trends and research to help you understand what's health and what's hype. I'm Tara Schmidt, a registered dietitian with Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. This episode, technology. But first, let's chat about a curious trend I've been seeing online in a new segment called Health or Hype. This trend is called dinosaur time. It's where you grab a fistful of raw spinach or other veggies and scarf it down. No chopping or salad dressing required. Why the name dinosaur time? Well, it's just a fun way to break out of the daily routine and pretend for a moment that you're an ancient herbivore. And if that's how you can convince yourself to eat your greens, be my guest. Now the question is, would a fistful of veggies a day keep the doctor away? What I like about this trend is we know that we are not getting enough fruits or vegetable or plants of any kind in the American diet, so it can be a cool way to try different veggies, especially without pressure. I don't think, though, that it's likely enough vegetables. And while a serving is a serving is a serving, it's probably only about a fifth of what you need over the course of your whole day. And I also want you to find ways to enjoy vegetables. Do we need to roast them or dip them in something? Have a nice salad with a new type of homemade dressing, or even mix it into another dish, whatever it may be. Although this is fun and cool to pretend like you're a triceratops, I do want you at the end of the day to experiment with new recipes and find ways that you actually like the vegetables that you're eating. Got a nutrition trend you want me to unpack? Send us a voicemail at 507-538-6272. I'd love to hear what strange or new ideas you've seen out there. Now, on to the show. Technology is changing faster than many of us can keep up with, and that includes healthcare technology. Whether your phone counts your steps, an app catalogs your calories, or your watch monitors your sleep, we have access to more personalized data about our bodies than ever before. But is more data actually helping us? And what about AI? When is it okay to talk to a computer rather than a dietitian or doctor? This episode's guest, Ro Huntriss, has a front row seat to changes in health technology. Ro is a London-based consultant dietitian and nutritionist and currently serves as a chief nutrition officer for the Simple app, a weight loss and health coaching app that has millions of users worldwide. She's here to help us understand how to pull apart the data and harness the benefits of today's healthcare technology. Hi, Ro. Thanks so much for being with me here today. I appreciate your time.
Oh, it's really, really great to be here with you. And I'm very much looking forward to our discussion today.
Same. When I think back on how healthcare technology has changed in just our lifetimes, it's wild. I remember telling patients, if you work with us, you'll get a pedometer. And it was a square pedometer that they hooked on their jeans.
Similarly, in the UK, we used to give away these little pedometers that people used to clip onto their jeans. And look where we are now.
When we look at the market of health apps and devices, it seems like the sector has been absolutely booming over the last few years. We've got watches and rings and Fitbits, and you have been working in the health tech space for a while now. How have you seen this market change over time?
I think the really interesting thing now is that it just appears to be so integrated into society. It's just come on kind of leaps and bounds over the years. And now approximately 1 in 5 adult Americans have a wearable device or something similar. And they're just so easily recognizable now. If somebody's walking down the street with an Oura ring, it's an Oura ring. If somebody's got an Apple Watch on, it's an Apple Watch.
Yes.
And the devices have just got so much more sophisticated.
So fancy.
So fancy. And what started off, very much as something that counted your steps. Now it can monitor elements of heart health. Devices can track glucose levels, monitor our sleep, and the list goes on and on. So it's wild in a way, actually, to see how far it's advanced. And I half think this is just the beginning. I really do feel that there's a lot more to come.
When we use the phrase health technology, what does that mean to you? What does it encompass?
So when many people think of health tech, we might think of apps or wearable devices, but actually it spans much further than that. And even things like telemedicine. So that's when you have a video call with your doctor or your dietitian. The softwares that enable that, they're health technologies. And AI, we're hearing AI all over the place at the moment, but this AI can be utilized in health in many ways. So health technologies may include AI coaching that we're seeing more of now, and even things like AI diagnostics using imagery. And then beyond that, we see the use of robotics and surgery. So all of these kind of things are health technologies.
It's amazing, right? We can monitor patients from miles and miles away. If I have to go into the doctor, I'm like, ugh, can't you do this from the computer? Like, I have to go get a pap smear. Like,
I know. And don't get me wrong, there is still very much a place for in-person appointments. A lot of people still do like them. But actually, the online appointments now are often really favorable because it means you don't have to take time off work to go to them. You can do it on your lunch break. It's really changed how healthcare works. And to be honest, I think it makes things easier on both sides, both for the clinician, but also for the patient as well.
Yeah. Let's talk specifically, you and I are both dietitians, about nutrition apps and fitness trackers. How widespread do you see the use of these? And why do you think people invest in them?
I think it is incredibly widespread. If we look just say to 2023, there were over 300 million health app users in the world, which is just mental. And if we're looking at America specifically, around about 50% of 18 to 34-year-olds used health app in 2023. And if we actually look at the age group of 65 and above, 30% of that group used health apps. People have these preconceptions. Older adults may not want to use a health app, but actually, and we see at the Simple app where I work as well, the majority of our user base is probably age 50 and above. And even with wearable devices as well, if we go back to 2015, it was 1 in 10. If we go back to 2010, then it was less than 1 in 20 people. So it is growing and growing and growing. But in terms of why do people want these technologies? I think a lot of people are more health aware, and they're aware of the positive impact that diet and lifestyle changes can have on their health. And I don't know about you, but I think that we as humans are really interested in ourselves. And so when something can tell us something about ourselves, it's interesting to us. And I think, why more people are using it. It's around accessibility. With so many people having access to a smartphone, there's so many apps out there that are free. So if people are wanting to improve their health and wellness, then why not access the support that is out there?
And one of the benefits I always tell my members and my patients is all you have to use this for is self-awareness. You don't have to associate guilt with it. You don't have to make life-altering changes. But if you can use this tech to learn more about yourself, learn more about your habits, then you can go and make the change. It doesn't have to be someone else in your life, healthcare provider or not, telling you what to do.
Exactly. Because if we look at traditional healthcare models, it was very much patient goes to healthcare provider tells them what to do, they go away and do it.
Or not.
Correct. But with these technologies, it cuts out that step. There is absolutely still a place for where healthcare professionals and medical intervention is required.
Yes.
But there are opportunities where some things we might be able to do ourselves and actually see some great improvements.
And then ideally save those one-on-one interactions with healthcare professionals for what they're needed for, right? In kind of a money-saving, time-saving, effort-saving on all parts.
Absolutely.
But do we need it all, right? Like, do we need to know our sleep cycles, our heart rate, if there's not, of course, a diagnosis related to your safety and such? Is it necessary or is it a little overkill sometimes?
So with health technologies, say taking wearable devices, for example, we don't need them. They're not essential to health improvement. But what we do find is that they can improve the health and well-being of many people. So it is very, very individual as to who may benefit. And I think it's important that we as individuals take responsibility. And if we are actually using it, checking in and like, is this benefiting me or not? And on the topic of sleep is a funny one. So say I go to bed at 10, wake up at 6. In my mind, I've had 8 hours sleep, feel great, ready to tackle the day ahead. If I had a wearable device that told me my sleep every following morning, the reality is that I probably didn't fall asleep at 10, and I might have woken up a few times in the night. So actually it may have been that I had 6.5 or 7 hours sleep. And I feel for me that if I knew that, I may go into my next day with the mindset of might not be on peak performance today. And it may then influence my day. But my perception of that is for me that it might not be helpful. However, some people find it super helpful. And then they understand that, oh, I've got 4 hours of sleep debt. I need to get an early night tonight. I think you need to assess, is it going to be useful for you or is it going to be a hindrance? And then you can make that decision for you.
I was talking to someone yesterday and I said, if you hadn't weighed yourself this morning, how would you have felt yesterday would have gone, right? Like I felt great about my nutrition and my exercise yesterday, but now I weighed myself this morning. I didn't see what I expected or wanted to see. And now I feel bad. I feel guilty. I feel like yesterday was crap. Now you have a completely different mindset. And that's not a mindset that I want anyone to have.
No. And again, I think it's going into this with a responsible mindset in looking out for yourself and being kind to yourself and reasonable with yourself in the interpretation of what these figures tell you. And, you know, in terms of apps, so we build apps, that's part of our responsibility as well. Like, how do we feed this data back? Actually just being supportive, being empathetic, having that right tone of voice that is going to support their progress and not hinder it.
Absolutely. Healthcare technology is booming. Telemedicine appointments have saved providers and patients tons of money and time. And the rise of wearable devices, trackers, and health and fitness apps has made personalized health information and guidance more accessible than ever. And let's face it, we like to learn about ourselves, and these technologies do that for us. I want to know if I took more steps than yesterday, and that can help us build more self-awareness of our habits. But it's also important to think about how having more data will influence you. Will it motivate you to take a walk after dinner to hit your goal? Or will you go to bed feeling bad about not getting enough steps in? In other words, we want our data to influence our actions, but not negatively impact our feelings. There's so many things you can measure. Maybe even too many things for one person to wrap their head around. So let's talk about how to make sense of these numbers. I think step counters or pedometers is kind of where this all started, and especially this number we hear all the time, 10,000 steps. Do we know where that number came from?
So yeah, where this 10,000 steps came from, basically, it was a marketing campaign many years ago, I think back in the 60s, for a pedometer, and it all came out of Japan. And the name of this pedometer in Japanese was the equivalent of 10,000 steps. And so they were like, right, cool. There was no study, no research to say this is the magic amount of steps to achieve optimal health. But they thought, you know what, 10,000 is a pretty nice number. And also 10,000 in Japanese, in terms of what that looks like to be spelt out, kind of looks like a walking man. So they pulled all of these ideas with zero scientific backing together and said 10,000 steps. And you know what? It stuck. And I remember the first time that I really questioned it was I went on what I felt was a really reasonable walk. I felt like I'd been walking for ages. And then I got home and my phone told me that I'd done 8,000 steps. I was furious.
Like, this is BS.
I've been out all day. And, you know, we have public health guidelines where, you know, doing 30 minutes of activity 5 times a week and aiming for that 150 minutes of activity. I was like, I feel like I've done more than that today and I still haven't reached my 10,000 steps. So I think with this is that is not a realistic target for everybody, and neither does it need to be. If your average is around 4,000 and you want to improve your activity, increase it, maybe aim for 6 and then think, does 6 work for me? And then if you get there and you're like, okay, I'm pretty happy with this. I can fit it in my schedule. It might be that 6,000 is a good thing for you to aim for. Or you might feel, actually, I want to challenge myself a little bit further and push it up to 8. But there doesn't need to be any hard or fast rules with this. It is just what works best for you.
I completely agree. When I worked in the hospital, I would get 12,000 steps just in my work day. And that's great. That's a lot of non-exercise activity, as we call it. I wasn't sitting at a desk, but I also wasn't exercising. So it didn't mean that at the end of the day, like I was successful with 12,000 steps. So now I don't have to do strength training or cardio.
Mm-hmm.
No, because my heart wasn't challenged. My muscles weren't challenged. I just had a really busy day of walking around the hospital. So I always will ask the people that I'm working with, what's your baseline? And we're going to go from there. And if you're a construction worker and you get 20,000 steps, that's cool. But we still have to do something that's challenging. Maybe not that day, maybe on the weekend, but it's so individualized that I know people get really stuck on this 10,000 number. And I'm like, is that a beneficial number for you? I also find people get really caught up in the details. They're like, okay, so I walked in a treadmill for 2 miles, but the treadmill said 2 miles and my smartwatch said 1.5. Which one is true? And I'm like, can we just celebrate the fact that you walked 2 miles on a treadmill and not like call the company about which one is more accurate? And then we also have like the cheaters who are like swinging their arms around. And I'm like, what's that for? I'm like, no one's watching how many steps you get via your cheater arm movement. So I don't know. Do you feel like there's difference in accuracy? And maybe more importantly, does it matter?
We've kind of got like a bit of a hierarchy, really. We've got things like self-reporting. Then we've got wearable devices, things that are attached to us. And then we've got things like our phone. So if we take steps as an example, really wearable devices and things that you have on you all the time are going to be the most accurate. But these can be overestimated or underestimated because it is linked to your movement. And as you say, if your arms are incredibly agile, then your steps may be
like
a little
big
bit
talker,
higher.
right? With like a lot of hand movements.
But conversely, if you're walking your stroller, then it may be that steps aren't picked up quite as much. They're likely to be picked up pretty accurately. But again, these are the kind of things that could have an influence on accuracy. But I think there is a disparity between smartwatches and then your phone, for example. But your phone isn't quite as sensitive to what a smartwatch would be. But also, if you're going to the bathroom or you are taking the trash out, you don't have your phone with you all the time.
What if you don't have pockets, right?
Exactly. But really, does it matter? Wearable devices are as accurate as they need to be because really those fine details are just not important.
Mm-hmm. The other example I've written about this for Mayo Clinic Press is I have a little treadmill and then I stand and I walk on it and I type or I'm in a meeting and my watch is like, are you still exercising? My legs are still moving. My arms aren't swinging because I'm typing. And so it really is discouraging to me because I don't get the credit that I want. It's all a mental game.
But you know what? We kind of want that praise, whether it's a person or a machine. We want it to tell us, well done.
And we know that there is some efficacy because we saw a review from the British Journal of Sports Medicine that found that participants in a 12-week exercise program who wore fitness trackers lost more weight than the ones who didn't wear one. So I think that people can identify whether they're going to be motivated by it. And I would say that most people are. Like we all know someone in our lives who like paces their living room to get to their 10,000 steps if they're at 9,500 at the end of the day. Like I'm getting that number. Let's talk about the benefits of food tracking or tracking your intake.
I agree with your point before in terms of it just helps with awareness. We eat throughout the day, throughout the week, so naturally, sometimes we just don't think about it. Tracking really helps to bring awareness of your eating behaviors. And you know what? Even if somebody doesn't track something, but they're supposed to be tracking, they're more aware that they've had it. So they're like,
exactly. Yeah.
So it helps with that. But also with apps, once you've tracked, you can get immediate feedback on that. So the app can interpret what you've had and then give you guidance. You know, it could be, well done, this meal was amazing, cool, carry on. Or this is something that you might want to consider for your next meal. And I think as well, if people have a particular health goal, then food tracking, it can help to keep people focused. It can help to keep them motivated. And interestingly, from our data, we do find that those who track their food more frequently see greater weight loss.
Absolutely. Same. I would say even or more so if they're honest about it, right? So even if you're going over your goal of calories or food servings, as long as you're being truthful about it, again, you just have that greater self-awareness and can do something different about it the next day, or you have greater self-awareness and you eat less of it, or you share it with someone, or you order something new next time. We want it just to be increasing your knowledge. Another one we see is a CGM. So let's talk continuous glucose monitors. How do these work? Do you find them to be helpful in influencing behaviors?
So when I worked clinically as a dietitian earlier on in my career, it was within diabetes. So people historically needed to check their blood glucose levels, and they would do them via multiple finger pricks per day. So literally needing to draw blood, put that blood on a monitor, then get your result. And then CGMs, or continuous glucose monitors, came in. And this is where people wear a sensor. So it's often on the arm, sometimes on the abdomen. And basically the sensor goes beneath the skin into it's only tiny, but it goes into the interstitial fluid. Basically, it is able to assess the levels of glucose there, which gives an indication as to the levels of glucose in the blood. It just continually measures it. And then there's often an app associated. So people can just look at their phone at any time of day and they can see what their blood glucose level is. Now, this was proving very, very popular for people with diabetes. And then people without diabetes got wind of this and they were like, can I have a go, please?
I want that.
So now what we see is people who are perfectly healthy having CGMs to understand what is happening to their blood glucose. And there's always such a debate around this. Like, what's the point? Is it beneficial for health? And again, I think it's a really personal thing. Certainly for people without diabetes, it is not essential. We know that.
I agree.
Basically, they consume food and then they look at the impact of their blood glucose and looking for, we hear this term all the time now, glucose spikes. What's giving me a glucose spike? But the effect of glucose rise in blood following a meal, that's only one interesting thing about the effects of one's diet. It can be useful if somebody has a high carbohydrate diet or a high sugar intake, because they can then make adjustments to that and then great. But also on the flip side, you could eat butter all day.
Ro, I was just going to say you could eat a stick of butter.
Me and you are so aligned. And then literally your blood glucose levels would be perfect.
Look at that.
But like, would your cholesterol be perfect? Probably not. So we really need to consider so much more than just blood glucose.
I remind people also that if your pancreas is functioning well, it's okay to have rises or, quote, spikes in your blood sugar. The important thing is how often and how out of range or what your A1C is, right? I don't love it when people freak out about eating a super healthy whole grain carbohydrate and their blood sugar rising. I'm like, yes, it did. and I'm assuming it came back down because you do not have diabetes or prediabetes. That's okay. I don't want there to be fear around any rise in blood sugar. That's just what happens.
I think an interesting part to this discussion is what are some of the benefits that people find from using CGMs for people who don't have diabetes? And the evidence really is emerging. But for some people, it can support with weight management. And I think the main reason is that, again, it's that awareness. When you're tracking something, you're really paying attention to what you're eating and then the effects of that on your body. So for some people, it can have a positive impact on weight management. And, it just boils down to it is a personal choice. These things cost money. They're not cheap. Generally, these sensors are for a couple of weeks and then you need to do another one. Do people want to do these endlessly? If you're happy and willing to buy them and you're seeing benefits, then by all means, it's an option, but it's not essential.
And we could always counsel you on other things that you could track in an app, potentially for free, or just by looking at labels, right? So we could have you track your added sugar intake and how many grams of added sugar are you having, or track your total carbohydrate intake per meal, right? So how do we find this balance between we're using the tech to educate us, to motivate us, versus like information overload? What have you seen in your practice or your work that we should look out for?
In my clinical practice, it's been actually largely positive, and people have gone into it with a good mindset and they've actually been really quite motivated by it. However, I worked less with people with eating disorders, and these kind of tools that require tracking and that show you a lot of data are just not really a good fit for a group like that. So I think we need to do a bit of risk assessment in terms of who these are likely to be beneficial for. And I think as well for us to actually just sit and reflect, is this good for me? Is this beneficial for me? And if it's not, even if you've invested money into it, the best thing is to just stop and focus on something that's a gentler approach that maybe has less of a focus on numbers and more on a focus of like how you're feeling. Because there's many different ways that we can approach health improvement.
Yeah, I think if you are recognizing that your social life is being impacted, your mood is being impacted, your self-worth or feelings of self-worth are being impacted, that those would be some examples of this may have become unhealthy for you. And if you still want to do something, maybe it's something with less data. So identifying this balance between how does it make me feel and how does it change my habits? So I hate to break it to you, but 10,000 steps is a mostly made-up number. Sure, walking that many steps is probably good for you, but you should consider what your baseline is and whether you're challenging yourself rather than picking a one-size-fits-all goal. Speaking of numbers, you don't need to obsess over accuracy, even if it's a little unsatisfying not to get your credit for every single step. In fact, the act of tracking itself, even if you're not hitting your goals, can still have benefits by helping build that self-awareness. And while continuous glucose monitors are a game changer for people with diabetes, it's unclear how helpful they are for non-diabetic folks. Blood sugar is only one way to interpret how food affects you, and it's normal for healthy people to have blood sugar spikes, even after a nutritious meal. But tracking health data isn't for everyone. If you have a history of disordered eating, or if tracking is detrimental to your social life, mood, or self-esteem, it's worth taking a step back to ask yourself if it's the best option for you. But as we started to discuss, the most important thing is finding balance. So let's dig into how we can keep a level head, especially in the ever-evolving world of AI. Do you have any advice for how people can take this gentle or balanced approach? How do we use tech to keep an eye on our holistic health, but not necessarily just what I'm eating and how many steps a day I'm getting?
Many apps initially focused on one area. So one app may have been a nutrition app. One app may have been a fitness app. One app is around sleep, etc. But actually what we are seeing more of now is integration. We can't just focus on one area of health and then neglect the rest. And it's not that we need to be 10 out of 10 and performing spectacularly at everything. We need to still be realistic and reasonable with ourselves. But yeah, it's great actually to see these apps that do have like a focus on not just nutrition, but activity, sleep, stress, general wellness and mood. And we're starting to see more and more of this now, which I think is a really positive thing.
And sometimes I will encourage just focusing on one of those things at a time.
Definitely.
Right? So I'm going to say one of the maybe downfalls of the Mayo Clinic diet app is that our habit tracker has 15 different habits. from nutrition to exercise to mindful eating, etc. So they're all great, but 15 can overwhelm people. So I really encourage people to just slowly build upon what they're doing. So if you want to focus on mindful eating first and do that for however long you want to, please do. Or if you want to focus on your sleep, I've had so many patients focus on sleep before they focus on nutrition with me. And I'm not a sleep medicine person. I'm a dietitian, but I've recognized in our conversation how essential better sleep for them is and how it is impacting their nutrition. So don't feel like you have to tackle all the puzzle pieces at once. If I try to go to bed at 8 and get my exercise in and I'm going to track my food and I'm just going to fail. And I'm a type A person, and that's going to make me feel really bad about myself.
No, I totally agree. And I think it's a really, really nice way to approach it. If you're focusing on sleep and this is your habit that you're focusing on, then you can give it your attention. You can invest in it. Then your habits can develop.
You're putting in the effort to knock that one thing out or become really confident in that. And when you've got it down, now we can pick up a new one.
Absolutely.
Love it. You are the Chief Nutrition Officer of the Simple app, which offers a lot of tools around healthy eating, including an AI coach. So tell me some of the benefits you've seen with your users and them working with an AI coach versus, of course, you've seen patients as a human professional.
So when we started out at Simple App, it was very much a self-monitoring platform. So people were logging the food that they consumed, the activity that they did, the drinks that they were consuming, weight, and like the times at which they were eating. But we had always thought about the idea of coaching and did think about the idea of human coaching and bringing that into the app. But then obviously technology evolved once again, and we launched our AI coach around about 18 months ago now. And it's one of our most popular features. Our users love it so much. But I guess the benefits of it are that if you've got a question about your journey, you have instant access. Obviously, going to see a human coach, like a dietitian, for example, is amazing. Not everybody has access, and they certainly don't at 11 o'clock at night. Also, just in terms of scalability, we have a lot of users. We've had like 17 million downloads to date. And we just don't have the human coaches to be able to support such a large group of people. But this one AI coach can serve millions of people on a daily basis.
And dietitians are the one building the algorithms, right? Like, you know what the answer would be because you wrote the answer.
Yes. And we've got, a team of dietitians and doctors that have helped to shape and build our coach that is called Avo. And, we're very careful in terms of, not just the scientific accuracy and the safety, but also the tone of voice. The aim is to be really supportive, empathetic, understanding. So if somebody had a day where their dietary choices weren't that great, we're not going to be there to tell somebody off. We're going to be there to understand and then help them move on to the next stage. Because people often, if they've had a bad day or a bad week, right, I'm throwing in the towel. If you've got someone or something there to help you to stay on track, then it can be very, very beneficial.
Yeah, I worked on a telemedicine platform that was doing a texting functionality with patients when they were on a GLP-1 medication. And the tech people kind of had written out what their assumed answers would be, like, you have lost weight, you have gained weight, like, are you nauseous? And I was there to like humanize it and be like, I would never say that to a patient. I'm like, well, it's the app. And I'm like, no, like, we're going to talk to these people like they're people. They know they're talking to AI. I know they're talking to AI, but I want them to feel like they're talking to me. So change it up, boys, is what I said. When do you feel like it's time for someone to see a dietitian? Like, okay, AI is great for pretty basic functionality and even some advanced functionality, but when would you encourage one of your users to seek out a dietitian?
This is one of the things that we train Avo to be able to respond. So we do not aim to prevent, treat, manage any medical conditions. So if somebody starts to speak to Avo about the management of their diabetes or their heart disease or their kidney disease, Avo will signpost them. This is a conversation that you should be having with your medical team, your healthcare provider, please go and do so. But also there are some more complex cases of obesity we can help with kind of like those basic functionalities, habit building. But when things do get a bit more complex, say if there's comorbidities involved and people may have kind of like issues in terms of mental health or other things like that, this is where we do need healthcare professionals really to be delivering the intervention.
Completely agree. Any misconceptions related to health tech that you can think of?
What I sometimes feel is the fear. And sometimes it can come from healthcare professionals as well, like the fear of, is this the right solution? And, as with all things in terms of, say, weight management, there isn't a one size that fits all, but actually it can be something that is really, really effective, and it can be an adjunct to other ways in which people manage their health. And to be honest, I think in terms of apps and the ability of apps, there's quite a lot of data now actually to show the effectiveness of apps compared to in-person care. It's just as good as seeing say a dietitian in clinic. That there are studies, and I think you guys might have done one.
I was going to say, we actually published a paper on people doing our program via our app and our online platform versus doing it in person and then via phone call. And the people who did the online platform actually were much more successful. And that's not to bash our in-person program. My gut feeling and my clinical opinion is just that the accessibility and the frequency of using the app and the platform was significantly higher than it was a monthly phone call after a few in-person days at the clinic. And it was our program versus our program. So we can speak ill or well of it in whatever context we want.
Actually, I worked at another digital healthcare provider before I worked at the Simple app, and we did research, and it was dietitian in person versus dietitian, but supporting people through an app. And the results were comparable. So I think there's actually sufficient data out there to prove the effectiveness of weight loss interventions through an app. And to be honest, I think that's a really, really good thing, because as we said, we need something that's scalable in terms of the number of people that do need support with weight management. Human coaches, we just don't have the capacity to do it. So I think healthcare professionals don't need to be fearful of this technology. It's more working with it as opposed to against it.
Yeah. And what should consumers look for? Like, how can we make sure that the tech is going to be working for us?
I think people just need to ask themselves, what are they trying to achieve? Because if they want to increase their physical activity levels, then potentially a wearable device could be something that's useful for them. If it's actually nutrition that they're wanting to improve, then perhaps an app that is around nutrition is going to be more useful than a wearable device. And then also thinking about, what are known barriers for me? If counting calories is triggering or it's just too arduous, then find a solution that doesn't count calories. And there are plenty out there. Because really the key thing in terms of any weight management or health intervention, the thing that's going to make it successful is adherence. So what is it that you are able to stick to? And then go for that.
I will always ask people when they ask me these questions, like, what's going to be different for you knowing this data? Are you going to do something different with your lifestyle? And if the answer is yes, then great, collect all the data you want. But if you're not going to do anything about it, then it was probably a waste of potentially money, time, effort.
Yeah.
As someone who works in the health tech space, what do you think the future is? Like, what can we expect to see moving forward? Are we going to have like rings and bracelets and all of the things?
Well, I mean, talking about jewelry, at the conference that we connected at, there were actually wearable earrings.
Were they cute? I didn't see them.
Yeah. And what this particular company do, they have like the health data, such as sleep and heart rate and other things like that. But they actually interpret it as per the stage of a woman's cycle.
They can tell that by your ears?
So they can tell in terms of like temperature and things like that. So say your sleep, for example, you can hypothesize that your sleep may be better at different parts of your cycle. But where I just feel that the development of AI is probably going to reach a place beyond our imaginations. Because even with the presence of AI coaches and their capabilities now, this is only going to grow. And even in terms of, say, like voice capabilities. So you can have voice conversations with your coach. So it can feel very, very real. And I totally appreciate that this can sound really scary, but it's really important that obviously it's done in the right way. It's done safely. Mm-hmm. The user is protected at all times. But I think from the healthcare professional perspective, we need to work with it and not against it. Ultimately, it is something that is going to be happening. So let's join this movement together.
Let's be the knowledge behind it, right?
Definitely. And I think the role of a dietitian and a healthcare provider in these more traditional roles will not go away. It's still needed and everything has its place. But I just think, with technologies, we're going to be able to support so many more people that perhaps don't need that complex level of support.
Well, Ro, thank you so much for joining me today. I can't wait to see all the new technologies that the next few years, or maybe even months, will bring.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed having the conversation with you. And it's a good vibe. I really enjoyed it.
So you heard it here. Health technology isn't going anywhere. Just kidding. I think we all knew that. But still, it's important to be smart about it. It might be helpful to focus on one health area at a time. Master that, and then build from there. For example, maybe you want to first start with tracking exercise. And then, once you have a weekly routine, start improving your nutrition, and then your sleep. And while AI might seem scary, like any tool, it has the potential to do good, if used wisely. An AI coach can provide more tailored nutrition advice to more people than a human ever could. But there's still a place for human conversations, especially for more complex health situations or treating a medical condition. And studies have shown apps to be as successful as in-person health interventions in certain cases. So the future is here. Let's let the technology work for us and with us. That's all for this episode. But if you have a follow-up question, leave us a voicemail at 507-538-6272, and we'll answer it in a future episode. On the next episode of On Nutrition, energy drinks.
If this drink has about 60 grams, we are talking about like 15 teaspoons of sugar in one serving.
For more On Nutrition episodes and resources, check us out online at mayoclinic.org/onnutrition. And if you found this show helpful, please subscribe and make sure to rate and review us on your podcast app. It really helps others find our show. Thanks for listening, and until next time, eat well and be well.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as medical or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider for any medical questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity does not constitute an endorsement of or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.